morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to the latest edition of Atheism UK's podcasting. And welcome to our panelists this morning, Don Cameron from the Bristol area and Guy Otten from the Manchester area. Now, Guy, I want you to report to us about your recent event. It was fabulous, wasn't it?
It was, yes, it was really amazing. Professor Grading, of course, who is honorary president of Atheism UK, as well as vice president of Humanists UK, came to do a talk on proving atheism, and we did it at we held it in partnership with Greater Manchester Humanists, and we had estimated 175 to 200 people there. I'm waiting for someone to tell me what the counting was, but we filled in the entire bottom part of the meeting house plus one of the galleries, which to around 200, with a few seats vacant. And he did a very good talk on the subject, talking about epistemology, about the concept of truth, what proving means. And using the sort of scientific approach to inform that word, and he touched on the history of religion, which was fascinating, and he always speaks very clearly, eloquently, and humorously, without notes, without PowerPoint. He's just an amazing speaker, and just
I know.
tour de force.
He is impressive.
And the recording will be available shortly. And of course, we'll rush it down to Atheism UK so it can be shared with all our people.
Brilliant. Yes.
Very much look forward to that.
Indeed. As you know, he fell sick when we tried to get him to present to the London area. But he's promised to come back and later in the year do the show that he was unable to attend back in November 22.
Well, I'm welcoming AC Grayling tomorrow night.
Excellent.
At the Bath Institution. And,
fantastic.
But he's talking to us about climate change rather than atheism on this occasion.
Interesting. Under whose auspices is that? Is that the Bath
I'm a convener at the Bath, grandly titled Bath Royal Literary and Scientific Institution. And we run a lot of lectures and things.
Interesting.
Yeah, we've got one similar in Manchester called, they're good. Some of these institutions go back 200 plus years, don't they?
Yes.
Ours started in 1824.
Yes. There was the most famous one probably is the Workers' Education Party, is it? Workers
Association, is it?
Association. WEA. That's right. Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, we want to get into the subject of our podcast shortly, but I want to say that at the moment, the news is more or less overtaking us because we're inundated with topics that we could podcast about. The most recent one is when the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, blabbed, I think is the appropriate word, that he would prefer to see the Anglican Church disestablished rather than lose the support of all of the people who disapprove of gay marriage. So we're going to have to talk about that one day, maybe next week.
Yeah, I've written an article on that, which will go into AUK shortly.
Great.
Go on the website. I'm just having it looked at by one or two people for comments.
Can we have it as the basis for next week's podcast, which you might like to lead?
Well, yeah, but sure. Let me just check that I'm available. But yeah, I know I should be available next week. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay.
Great.
Yeah.
You're booked. Excellent.
Right.
Okay. Right. Now, the topic that we're going to address this morning is the death of Pope Benedict XVI. Now, of course, any death is a very sad event, so we don't want to denigrate the They're no longer with us. But it's interesting from the point of view that when a pope resigns, and this is what he did about 10 years ago, it's almost a miracle, because it's hardly ever happens. The previous papal resignation was over 800 years ago. So I'm going to fill in a little bit of the history of this particular pope, Benedict XVI, and then I'd like to get your reaction, because he had an interesting life. He started out as a Hitler youth under the name of Ratzinger, because that was his original family name. And of course, Benedict was his papal name. But of course, in Germany at that time, or in Austria too, I think, everybody had to be a Hitler youth. There was no choice. And in fact, one of his cousins who had Down syndrome was murdered by the Nazis, who of course had this eugenics program, this concept of cleaning the race, the Aryan race. Anyway, he survived that and then went to seminary and started lecturing in universities as a theologian. And, yes. And then he ended up as Archbishop of Munich. And the next stage of his career was to become the prefect of the Sacred Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. Which is interesting because it's where they decide what should be regarded as true by Catholics. And interestingly, while he was in that role, he abolished a concept that they had, which was called limbo. That limbo had been created some hundreds of years before as the edge of hell, not the middle of hell. And it was where unbaptized children were supposed to go. Because up until then, mothers whose babies had died shortly after birth, before the priest could get to them and baptize them, were doubly distraught because not only had they lost their infant, but they imagined it was burning in hell. So 400 years ago, the church, the Roman Catholic Church, took pity on them and created this edge of hell place that they could go to, which wasn't so hot. But Ratzinger abolished it. He said that it was only a theological hypothesis and never a defined truth of faith, which is interesting because it seems that in Catholicism, it's possible to make something true or false by definition. What do you think of that?
Well, I mean, I was brought up a Catholic, and I was led to believe in limbo, not so much as on the edge of hell. I thought I was given to understand it was somewhere completely separate, not a place of punishment, but a place of limbo, essentially.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, the word has gone into our language. It means sort of really in no particular place, in a sort of place of nothing much.
Yes.
Waiting room.
Yes.
But I think it is interesting the point you make that what appears to be an article of faith in one century, then in a following century, the Pope or the Vatican can decide actually that was never an article of faith. It was more a supposition, and to change things. And I think that therein lies some hope of reform in the Catholic Church. There's a long way to go, but
it's what interests me is it's possible to do this just by declaration, human declaration. This shall be true today, and this shall not be true anymore. So
I think it wasn't just a declaration. I think it probably followed a certain amount of consultation and theological discussion.
and culminating in a declaration.
Well,
Yeah.
there probably was a chain of reasoning, however
Yes,
spurious,
Yes,
which led
indeed.
them to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I think that the point about Ratzinger's early life, I think you made the right point there, that pretty much everybody had to join the Hitler Youth.
Mm.
Therefore, and he was only something like 12 or 14 or something at the time. So
Mm.
we cannot ascribe sort of moral blame
No.
for that. However, what we can be concerned about is the formative, subconscious formation of his mind politically and morally by such an adverse experience and a fascist essentially movement. That is worrying. And how do we know how far that has affected him throughout his life? We just don't. Yeah.
Yes. But going back to the declaration idea, I wonder how many other things are just not proper defined truths of faith, but theological hypotheses.
The church itself won't know until they decide to get rid of them.
Yes.
We know nowadays that it's all of them, of course.
Yes. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, continuing with his life story, in the following years, he, in this position of prefect of the Sacred Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, he acquired a familiarity with the contours of the problem of sexual abuse to an extent that virtually no other figure in the Catholic Church can claim. So, and therefore he became a cleansing agent, if you like. He had zeal to clean up the mess of what he later described as the filth in the Catholic Church. He's referring to the paedophilia exposures and so on. So he was zealous about that activity. This is all before he became Pope. But later, in the position of Pope, he was accused of failing to have dealt with paedophilia scrupulously enough.
Do you know, John and Don? The word "filth" struck me straight away there when you used that word, because that is the sort of word that Hitler and the fascist movement used to describe people they disagreed with or disapproved of for racial or political reasons.
Yeah.
And because I'm just wondering whether it's an easy word to use when in fact the problem goes to the heart of Catholic doctrine when it comes to the abuse of children by celibate clerics. It's the root of the root of the problem seems to me to be an unrealistic expectation that human beings should behave in a non-sexual manner when sexual drives and needs are present in everyone, or pretty much.
It's the biological imperative. That's if we have a reason to be here, that's it.
Yeah.
But I suppose we must recognize that if you're going to recruit your clergy from people who are willing to take a vow of celibacy, then you're going to get a very non-random selection of people.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, yes, and amongst those people will be people struggling with their own sexuality and trying to repress what they regard as probably unwholesome motivations and lusts. It's all very, very. It's very unhealthy, the whole thing, really.
Rather than non-random, I would say non-normal, because in the normal curve you have the majority of people in the middle, and then you have the outliers at the edges, and those are the ones you're going to be selecting from, the ones who ostensibly aren't sexual or wish to not be sexual.
Yes, at that moment in their lives.
Yes.
But of course, it may well change as time goes on.
Indeed. Yes, as frustration builds. Yes. they are going to be an untypical population in the priesthood.
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's interesting though. You do see sexual problems and abuse in other churches where celibacy doesn't reign, but I suspect it's less prominent. But what the other aspect of it is interesting is there's a power problem. You know, you get powerful kind of people, clerics or leaders of Jehovah's Witnesses and people like this who have power socially within their congregations and then are able to exploit that power. And of course, so that's present in the Catholic Church as well. But in the Catholic Church, it's kind of enhanced and distorted further by the celibacy, I think.
By this recruitment technique, yes.
Yeah.
So when he was Pope, or even subsequently after his retirement, he was accused of failing to deal with at least 4 paedophile priests. And he admitted publicly that mistakes were made. And he went on to say, this is particularly pertinent, I think, what earlier generations held as sacred remains sacred for us too, and it cannot be all of a sudden entirely forbidden or even considered harmful. Now, what's weird about that is there's obviously an exception here because he abolished limbo. So that didn't remain sacred for us too, did it?
Yes.
The poor guy is conflicted.
Yes. No, obviously, when you're in a powerful position like the Pope, you can make your arguments fit your own program, whichever it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm. It sounds to me like someone trying to convince themselves about a dubious doctrine.
Well, yes. And it also reminds me a little bit of the Quran, where everything that good happens because of Allah, but everything that bad happens is your fault.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's probably in Christianity as well somewhere, but it's definitely very clear in the Quran.
Well, it's assigned to Satan, of course, in Christianity, not yourself. There's always a get out.
Well, I think the Muslims entertain Satan, don't they?
They do. Shaitan, they call him. Shaitan. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you see, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, guys. Well, I think we've done this to death now, haven't we?
Well, I'm sure there's always more to be said. I mean, I do take my hat off to someone who resigns. You know, Jacinda Ardern has just done it. And I think this shows strength of, you know, the realization that you may not be the right person at that moment in history to do the job. Yes. And I think that the Queen could have resigned, you know, quite a long time ago.
Yes.
Not that we would have necessarily done any better, but, you know, you don't know.
Well, your point...
She would live even longer.
Yes, maybe. Through not having to meet Liz Truss. Oops, did I stray into politics there?
Yes,
Sorry.
we do wonder. It's very suspicious. Liz Truss meets her and a few days later she's gone.
Yes.
Well, luckily I haven't met Liz Truss so far.
Yes, mental note, do not meet Liz Truss. or this reform character, Richard Kais or something, Bice or
oh, we know Tice. Yeah, we know who you mean.
Yeah. I'm sure we should emphasize that our discussion of Liz Truss is a joke.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And I take your point, Guy, that religions have a predilection to authority and the hierarchy that entails. And maybe we should talk about that in a future podcast.
Yeah.
Okay,
well,
guys.
Well, there are some democratic religions, like Quakers.
Yeah, that's true. Yes.
Yeah, but anyway, yeah. Let's do that.
Indeed. Okay, guys. Thank you very much. I'm going to wrap it up now. Say goodbye.
Cheers, everybody.